While you've been watching Netflix, China quietly built a maritime empire bigger than Britain ever dreamed of. We're talking about 129 ports across 53 countries, $1.4 trillion in strategic investments, and a network that now handles 27% of global trade. This isn't just about shipping containers. This is about who controls the world's economic choke points for the next century. Right now, as cargo ships navigate the world's oceans, nearly 3 out of every 10 containers pass through facilities controlled by Chinese companies. That smartphone in your pocket, the coffee you drank this morning, the car in your driveway, chances are part of their journey was managed by China's growing port empire. But here's what makes this remarkable. China accomplished in just 12 years what took the British Empire 64 years to build. Let's put this in perspective. At the height of British naval dominance between 1850 and 1914, the Royal Navy controlled roughly 200 commercial ports worldwide and maintained 100 naval bases. The sun never set on the British Empire because they had established coaling stations and naval facilities on every continent. That network enabled Britain to dominate 25% of global trade and project power across the world's oceans. It was the foundation of what historians call Pax Britannica, British peace through superior naval power. Fast forward to today, and China has systematically built something potentially more powerful. Through state-owned giants like Costco Shipping and China Merchants Group, Chinese entities now operate or hold ownership stakes in 129 ports spanning 6 continents. From Greece's Piraeus port in the Mediterranean to Peru's new Changi facility on the Pacific. From Africa's strategic Djibouti base to Sri Lanka's controversial Hambantota port, China has quietly assembled the infrastructure for what could become the next maritime hegemony. The numbers behind this expansion are staggering. Chinese companies invested $11 billion in overseas port development between 2010 and 2019 alone. But that's just the beginning. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, cumulative investments reached $1.384 trillion by 2025, with a record $123 billion spent in just the first half of this year. To put that in context, that's nearly 10 times the size of the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe after World War II. This isn't random investment, it's strategic positioning around the world's most critical maritime choke points. Take the Strait of Malacca, where 25% of all global trade passes through. China invested $10 billion in Malaysia's Malacca Gateway project, essentially gaining influence over one of the world's most important shipping lanes. Or consider Djibouti, where Chinese investment in the Doraleh port provides control over the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, through which 10% of global trade flows. What started as a commercial port quickly evolved into China's first overseas military base in 2017. This represents a fundamental shift in how global power works. Traditional empires built naval bases first, then used military force to secure commercial advantages. China has flipped this model entirely. They're building commercial ports that generate revenue while providing strategic access. It's empire building that pays for itself. When Greece's Piraeus port came under Chinese management, container traffic increased so dramatically that it jumped from 93rd to 36th globally in rankings. The port employs 1,000 Greek workers with only 10 Chinese staff, creating local jobs while serving Chinese strategic interests. But here's where this gets concerning for American interests. The United States currently maintains 71 overseas military installations, primarily focused on the Pacific region. China's 129 port access points provide a different but potentially more valuable form of global presence. These aren't just shipping facilities, they're potential intelligence gathering points, logistics hubs, and in some cases, future military assets. The Djibouti precedent shows how commercial ports can transform into military bases, supporting power projection capabilities. The strategic implications become clear when you look at naval capabilities. China now operates the world's largest navy with 370 warships compared to America's 291. More importantly, China controls 53% of global shipbuilding capacity, while the United States manages just 5%. This means China can both build more ships and provide them with more places to refuel, resupply, and conduct operations far from home waters. Consider what this means for America's traditional role as guarantor of global maritime security. Since World War II, the U.S. Navy has ensured freedom of navigation and protected global trade routes. But what happens when a potential adversary controls the ports where American naval vessels have traditionally refueled and resupplied? Chinese port operators gain access to shipping manifests, cargo information, and vessel movements that provide valuable economic and military intelligence. The presence of Chinese personnel and equipment at these facilities creates opportunities for signals intelligence collection and maritime surveillance. The economic dimension is equally significant. Chinese control of port operations enables preferential treatment for Chinese vessels and cargo, while potentially restricting access for competitors. This capability extends to 27% of global container trade, providing China with unprecedented influence over international commerce. During hypothetical conflicts, Chinese entities could deny port access to U.S. allies or disrupt commercial shipping supporting American interests. Yet the most remarkable aspect of China's strategy is how they've achieved this expansion. Unlike historical empires that faced resistance to military occupation, China's commercial approach is welcomed by host nations as economic development. When Sri Lanka leased Hambantota Port to China in 2017 following financial difficulties, it wasn't Chinese coercion but Sri Lankan initiative to address fiscal pressures. As Sri Lankan officials emphasized at the time, "We thank China for arranging this investor to save us from the debt trap." This commercial model provides political advantages that traditional military basing cannot match. Chinese investments bring immediate economic benefits, jobs, infrastructure, and increased trade capacity. The $3.6 billion Chancay port in Peru will transform South America's Pacific trade connections. The extensive Chinese presence across African ports is rebuilding continental shipping infrastructure that had declined since decolonization. These are genuine development projects that serve Chinese strategic interests while meeting host nation needs. The technological dimension adds another layer of strategic significance. Chinese companies like China Communications Construction Company have become global leaders in port design and construction, while COSCO has emerged as the world's largest terminal operator. This technological dominance ensures Chinese influence even in ports without Chinese ownership, as local operators increasingly depend on Chinese expertise and equipment. Current trends suggest this expansion will continue accelerating. Brazil has scheduled 22 ports for auction by 2025, with Chinese companies expected to bid aggressively. Ongoing negotiations span continents, from additional African facilities to potential Caribbean investments that would place Chinese port operators in America's traditional sphere of influence. The Belt and Road Initiative's incorporation into China's constitution signals long-term commitment to this strategy that transcends any individual leadership. The American response faces significant challenges. Initiatives like the Partnership for Global Infrastructure aim to provide alternative development finance, but lack the scale and speed of Chinese investment. The G7's Infrastructure and Investment Partnership represents similar efforts, but developing nations often prefer Chinese offers that focus on immediate infrastructure delivery rather than governance reforms and environmental standards that slow Western projects. Military responses include strengthening alliance relationships and developing new basing agreements, but these often require navigating complex sovereignty concerns while competing with Chinese economic incentives. Recent agreements with Pacific nations reflect efforts to preserve American strategic access, yet the fundamental challenge remains: how do you compete with an empire that pays for itself? This transformation represents more than just maritime competition, it's a fundamental shift in how international power projection works in the 21st century.
China has demonstrated that economic statecraft can achieve strategic objectives traditionally requiring military capabilities. By leveraging commercial investment rather than military conquest, they've constructed a network that may exceed the British Empire's reach while avoiding the political costs of traditional imperial expansion. The ultimate question isn't whether China's port empire represents a challenge to American global leadership. That much is clear. The real question is whether the United States and its allies can develop effective responses that preserve the international order that has enabled decades of prosperity and security. As container ships continue navigating the world's oceans, increasingly through Chinese-controlled ports, the answer to that question may determine the balance of global power for generations to come. What do you think? Can America adapt to this new form of strategic competition, or are we watching the emergence of a new maritime empire that will reshape global trade and security? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's discuss what this means for America's future role in the world.